everyone can see my slides, the screen.
Yes,
I'm
yep,
sharing.
on screen, Andrea, thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Safety Action's October Safety Webinar. I have here today with me Gary Rose, CEO, and Benedict Olih, Safety Consultant here. And I'm Andrea Rowe, General Manager at Safety Action. Now, this morning, we're going to talk to you about some of the topics that we talked about in our October edition of the Safety Action newsletter. If you are already subscribed to our newsletter, you will have received that in your email last week. If you don't subscribe to our newsletter, you'll find there's a link to the newsletter up in the chat there, and you can subscribe to that through our website. So I invite you to do so. So today we're going to take you through some of the topics. Ben is going to talk to us about safety in unprecedented times. This month, Ben talked about wrote an article of which part 2 to part 1, which featured in the September newsletter. So I encourage you to go back and read those. Now, over the last couple of months, some workplaces have been given mandatory directions for the COVID-19 vaccination. So we just talk about how you need to keep those records if that mandatory requirement applies to you. And if you're in Victoria, that'd be almost all of us soon. We have been asked a question in the past about whether air conditioning systems can cause COVID. Gary will tell us the answer to that. This month is your last chance to join the Safety Action benchmarking survey. So we will tell you how to do that. We tell you about a new respiratory clinic that the Alfred Hospital in Victoria has opened up. We have released an online safety training course, and I'm going to tell you about the OHSA top 10 safety violations. So firstly, I'll hand over to Benedict Olih. Hi, Ben.
Hello, Andrea. Thank you.
And Ben's going to tell us about managing safety in unprecedented times. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. This is more like a follow-up from the last articles, and we basically just focused on the three last steps that we should take in managing safety in unprecedented times. Now, I'll just quickly go over the three of them, which is basically networking. The second is basically modeling self-care and encouraging that as well. And then lastly, the need for us to actually get involved in personal development. Now, just quickly, the importance of networking is in unprecedented times, it's very easy to try to basically see how we can solve all our safety issues. But because we have such a rich, rich network, we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. All we need to do basically is get information from others who might have in our sector who might have similar issues and adapt it. So it's basically easy for us to adapt it and solve issues. So the power of networking is really important in unprecedented times. Being able to apply that logic in terms of helping you manage whatever challenges you might be facing. Now, the second is modeling of self-care. With COVID and all other issues going on around in the world, people have actually gone off their routines, and it affects both their physical, mental, and emotional health. So as safety leaders, it's very important that we do our best to help people get into the right routine, whether it's eating healthy, whether it's a case of whether exercising or stuff like that. We need to really help people get that. But at the same time, we need to also be model. So it's that thing of, as a safety leader, you need to think up ways that you could actually model these activities. So people can see that you are not just preaching it, you're actually practicing what you preach. And finally, just to end this, it's all about personal development. In today, everything is changing so quickly. in the past, we had a lot of face-to-face training, but right now everything is moving towards online training. So it means that there's a lot of new skills to learn, a lot of new new tricks to actually and learn about how to actually effectively manage. So it's very important that we take advantage of all the initiatives or programs or courses out there to actually help us as safety leaders to be able to manage safety even more effectively. So thank you. I'll hand over to Andrea now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. And what you talk about is really important. Did you have any ideas, Ben, of, how while we're at home working remotely, do you have any suggestions on how we can continue that networking and personal development without being face to face with our peers?
Yeah, so just like I said, there's actually so many courses online on how to actually be able to be more effective in terms of whether it's planning safety, whether it's, doing safety trainings. So we basically don't need to leave the confines of our homes. We can just basically go online and really check out what's on there to actually help us to be more effective in delivering safety, even if it has to be done online.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Ben. And, when we talk about we can move these things to online. So those of you who are interested in safety training online, we'll tell you more about our safety leadership course, which we've put an online option for you to get later this year. So thank you for that. Now, I wanted to talk to you. I did mention that some workplaces now have a mandatory vaccination requirement. If that applies to your workplace, you may well be aware that that has commenced in some workplaces and is due to commence, what we know in Victoria, or basically anyone that leaves the house for work will be under a mandatory vaccination requirement from the 15th of October for the first dose at least. And now the question is, certainly for authorised workers, we're still waiting for the government to make that legal direction. However, we do make assumptions that it may be similar to the other industries that already have mandated vaccinations, such as hospitals, aged care, construction work. And under these requirements, a workplace is required to collect vaccination status. You must keep records of the vaccination status of the relevant workers or persons that attend the workplace for work. And it is important to know that, to remind you that you do not have to actually keep copies of all the vaccination certificates for the workers, but you do need to cite the records. Somebody needs to cite them, and you need to make a note of what was cited and keep a record of their vaccination status. Now, I'm just letting you know what the official documents are. And I will let you know that this is not specifically legislated, the actual type of record that you must cite. But the indicated good practice is the official records being the COVID-19 digital certificate, which someone can get from their online MyGov Medicare account, which looks like the photo of the phone above. So people can download that on their phone. Alternatively, you can only get this record after you've had both doses of your vaccine. So if they've only had one dose, the relevant record is the Australian Immunisation Register, which includes the date that they received the COVID vaccine. Certain workplaces will accept booking for the vaccine for a grace period. So that could be any sort of evidence of a booking. And the vaccination centres also issue a vaccination card. It does say on that card that it's not an official COVID-19 vaccine certificate, but it certainly could be used in the short time period while someone awaits their official digital record to be updated. So what you need to do is keep a register of these records that you have cited. We did talk to our friends at LinkSafe about, keeping records. So there are, LinkSafe is one digital online system that you can use to keep your workers or contractors' vaccination records. So I encourage you to have a look at that system, or others if you're interested in keeping online digital records. And of course, you need to keep in mind the privacy requirements by limiting access to these systems to only people that need them.
Thanks, Andrea. Gary here. I've just got a text come through on the chat line below from Norma. Thank you. I'll just read. Good morning, Andrea. Some builders are requesting the certificates are uploaded to their OHS systems. I would suggest, Andrea, unless you tell me different, that's simply a company rule, nothing to do with new government rules.
Correct. And this is one way. Thanks, Norma. Certainly, I am aware many businesses are using a digital system, and they require, for example, workers or contractors to upload it. That is permitted. The only thing is, the builder or the owner of the system just needs to make sure that it is a person's medical record. So there are privacy rules around it. They just need to make sure that they restrict access to those records to only the essential people that need to cite the record. So what they can do is, for example, the output of that system might simply be to actually they check the record and they can hold the record in, with very limited access from others. But what they can do from those OHS systems is print a register that shows what records they have. At the same time, still protecting the records. So that's the critical thing. So if you have an online system, yes, you can use it, but you can't share that information. You can't give access to the actual records to anyone who does not need it. So, for example, other employees must not be able to access a person's medical records. But you could, for example, print a register showing the vaccination status to show the authorities, for example, if you needed to. I hope that makes sense, but please do share your comments on that one. And I see Cheryl, thank you, is also reminding us that these documents are subject to the Privacy Act, as we've been talking about. So that's the key message for those about actually keeping a record. So as I did mention previously, you don't have to actually keep copies of the certificates for your workers. You can actually just cite them and on your register record what evidence you cited. So thanks for that, and happy to keep that conversation going in the comments. Interested to hear how any of you, any of your thoughts about how to record that information and any tips anyone has. Okay, Gary, we've been asked if the workplace's aircon system is causing COVID-19. Can you tell us about that?
Thanks very much, Andrea. You might want to just put up the next slide if you can advance it. This is, to me, an interesting one as a safety engineer. One of our clients recently asked me to help them with a risk assessment. They were going to purchase air purifiers for 82 buildings that the client owned, and wanted a risk assessment. The board wanted to know, is this appropriate? Will it work? Is it cost effective? Are there other risks? This is interesting. And during the preliminary planning discussion for this project, one of the people said, oh, we're also going to get some carbon dioxide meters and measure the level of carbon dioxide, which we call CO2, in the atmosphere in buildings. And as a safety engineer, I couldn't immediately see the link between COVID and CO2 level in buildings. And but when I stepped back and had a quick look at the research, and I just want to share this with you because I found it interesting, and I think you will as well. So is COVID caused by high CO2 levels? No. What COVID is, what CO2 levels tell you if you have a CO2 meter in your room or building, and you could have these in the domestic home as well, although generally there's not enough people to put enough CO2 into the air. It's a proxy to tell you the health of your ventilation system. High CO2 levels, carbon dioxide in a building, is merely telling you that the ventilation system is down at too low a level for fresh air. Therefore, the CO2 is building up. What this tells you is if anyone in that building has COVID, it is more likely, it is now a higher risk that you will have a spreading event. And this is now what the research has shown after probably the last 12 months is high spreading events inside buildings is coming from the air conditioning system. So remember, information's changing rapidly. We're not experts on this. And to be honest, I don't think anyone is an expert on COVID at this point in time, and as in what are the causes and preventions. But I think the research evidence is quite clear. Poor ventilation rates increase the risk in buildings that if anyone has COVID and they're breathing out the aerosols, that they will be recirculated and kept in the air in that building, and therefore you're at greater risk. Having said that, put COVID to one side for a moment. Over probably the last few decades, we've observed both in large buildings, in the air conditioning systems and in aeroplanes, the manufacturers and operators have been gradually reducing the fresh air rates into buildings and into aircraft. And why have they done this? I can tell you it's got nothing to do with our health. What it's got to do with is saving money, because the more fresh air you bring in, the more you've either got to heat it if it's too cold or cool it if it's too hot. So it increased energy costs. This is about climate change. This is about cost and energy consumption. So we understand why they've done it. Now we've arrived in this year in 2021 and from last year 2020 with COVID, this is now contradicting that trend. And so what this is now telling us, we're going to have to reassess our air conditioning systems and ventilation. And by the way, if you're just in a home with no forced ventilation, just open the doors and windows if the weather's ambient and you'll get lots of fresh air, and that reduces the risk. Secondly, high levels of CO2 make people drowsy and feeling unwell. So this is known to contribute, for example, for international air travellers, as to why the people feel particularly poor getting off aircraft. It's not just the lack of sleep. It's also that they've had quite poor air during that whole time with high CO2 levels, and makes you tired and drowsy. So is there a link between poor building ventilation and COVID spreading events? The research tells us yes, but there is no guarantee just because you've got high CO2 levels that you will get COVID, because if no one in the building has COVID, it just means you're at risk if somebody presents into that building with COVID, but how would you know? So universities and schools are moving to HEPA filters, which are high efficiency particulate filters, which will capture COVID aerosols as well as other bacteria and many other viruses. Not perfectly, but they do, and they reduce it. So you're probably hearing in the news. So this is why you're hearing in the news, they're talking about HEPA filters and air conditioning systems in schools and other locations, and universities will be the same. And employers in large buildings are now starting to question, the workers and the unions quite validly are saying, is it safe for us to come back to work? Particularly in a large building with a shared air conditioning system throughout the entire building. So this is why it's important. So you'll see there on screen, the actual CO2 meters are actually quite cheap, and they start at about $300, but of course they go up to a few $1,000s, depending on what make and model, and people can have them built in large buildings. But these can be used to just do spot readings to say, and advise the occupants that we've actually got low CO2 levels. So just very quickly, outdoors, go outside your building right now. The open air is about 400 parts per million CO2. That's the normal, natural level of CO2 in the atmosphere on Earth at this point in time. So this is about it. But you and I breathe out in your breath that you exhale. The carbon dioxide level is 40,000 parts per million. 40,000, which, by the way, if you're in an enclosed space with 40,000 parts per million, you would die quickly. And that's why you've got to have fresh air, but it dilutes very quickly. So the more people in the room, the more naturally that the CO2 level is going to build up. And that's why CO2 meters may well be a helpful thing. So what I've prepared is a fact sheet beyond the brief newsletter article for this month. So if anyone's interested, just let the office know, email or call, and we'll shoot you out a copy of that fact sheet on indoor air quality and COVID. I think if you're not interested, a number of your co-workers and unions and others will be interested. So that's probably a valuable fact sheet to get a hold of. So that's my summary there, Andrea. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Gary. And now with these CO2 meters, we understand that ventilation needs to be improved. You talked about using a portable monitor. Is there value in putting, fixed static CO2 monitors in workplaces to monitor that?
Oh, absolutely. Most large buildings already have CO2 meters in their plant rooms. So a lot of the large buildings, say Melbourne CBD, Sydney CBD, etc., for many years, measuring the air quality inside the buildings have had CO2 meters. But what I mentioned earlier, Andrew, they've been progressively allowing that level to increase to save money. So they've been bringing it up. So I'm now telling you, outdoors is 400. We don't want it above 800, average 8 hours, but we must not go above 1,000 parts per million at any time. So if you're doing spot readings, it should be less than 1,000 parts per million. That's what it should be measuring. And the great thing is you can calibrate your portable one as well, take it outside. You've only got to go walk outside and it should be measuring about 400. It might be 410, 420 parts per million carbon dioxide. So it's a nice way to self-calibrate your meter as well.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Gary. And you're going to tell us now about that people still have an opportunity for their business to participate in our safety benchmarking.
Thanks, Andrea. Yes, firstly, thanks to everyone who has participated in our safety performance benchmarking survey this year. So lots of our readers and participants in our webinar for their company have submitted the data. It's easy online and have done that. So thank you everyone who's done that. We've got close to 30,000 employees covered by a variety of businesses, large and small. So we got a pretty good statistical sample. But as always, as a safety engineer, I'd like more. So we've decided to hold the survey open for another week. So for the next week, we will continue to take submissions on that. Just go to our website, www.safetyaction.com. Sorry, Andrea.
Oh, excellent. No, I was just letting you know, Miriam's posted the link to the website. So if you want to have a look at how to participate, you can just click on the link in the chat, which will take you straight to the website.
Terrific. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you, Gary. Now, I'm just telling you briefly, which we did show in our newsletter, that the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne have opened a dedicated respiratory clinic in Melbourne, and this new clinic is the first of its kind in Victoria in partnership with WorkSafe, and this clinic provides free health screening for those workers concerned about the silicosis, from exposure to silica dust. So if you have any concerns or know anybody, encourage them to make a booking at the Alfred Respiratory Clinic. And next, Ben told us that, it is really important to keep up our professional development and learning and networking even throughout these lockdowns. So I'm pleased to let you know that we have updated our safety leadership course to run this one online. And we have separated into 2 half days in November. So the safety leadership, usually runs as a 2-day course, and it is our most popular course. So if you are interested in continuing your learning before we can come together face to face, have a look at that, and you can enroll in that online safety leadership course. We will post a link to that event subscription shortly in the chat, so have a look out for that. Now, last month, I told you that I will be presenting at the World Congress on Safety and Health at Work. Now, that event was filmed earlier in the year, but they put it together as a live online congress. And I presented about the OHS and robots and talked about the changing safety needs for in the digital age, in particular safety of robots. I was joined in a group where we talked about other, new digital risks, including cyber safety and other topics. So you feel free to check that out. You can still, the video, the Congress has completed, but it's now all online as a video on demand online event. So I'm just posting the link to that online Congress now, which I encourage you to check that out. This one's a favorite topic of mine every year. I don't know if anyone, OHSA is the safety authority in the USA. And every year they publish the list of top 10 violations. These are the top 10 topics that they issue notices or violate. They call them violations. In Victoria or in the other states, we would call them, prohibition or improvement notices or prosecutions. And this is what the OHSA calls them. Interestingly, half of the top 10 violations were falls related. So in the top 10 included, violations included failures in fall protection, unsafe ladders, lack of training in falls protection, and unsafe scaffolds. So the key message there is clearly preventing falls is a key priority for the safety authorities in the US. Next month, we will tell you about the top 10 violations or prosecutions in Australia. And we do tend to find a similar pattern in Australia. What we know is, falls is a leading cause of death in many industries, including construction. So we tend to find similar statistics there. The other topics in the top 10 in the US included lotto failures, so failure to isolate machinery, inadequate respiratory protection, forklift truck safety, and inadequate machinery guarding. Again, we expect to see probably similar things, but next month we will tell you more about the statistics for Australia. So please join us again for this webinar next month. Next month, we will also be talking to you about fatigue, and WorkSafe in Victoria have given us an update about that as a reminder that, fatigue is, especially healthcare workers, is a focus at the moment. It's not just a feeling of physically exhausted, there's mental health concerns as well. Stephen Webber of our team is going to talk to us about the psychology of emergencies and also update us on WorkSafe Queensland's updated approach in their expectations for dangerous goods management. So this will be really important if you have dangerous goods, in particular in Queensland. And just a heads up on that one is that the authorities are actually expecting and auditing your workers to find out that your workers know all about the safety data sheets for the chemicals and how to access those. So look out for that one. So thank you for joining us today. Our next safety webinar will be on Friday, the 12th of November. So I hope you will join us then. I remind you, if you haven't subscribed already to our newsletter, please do so at on our website. And feel free to get in touch if you have any questions, comments, or any other questions about anything we've talked about in our webinar today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everyone, for joining us as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.